You seeing this fucking wall? I mean, no, seriously, look at that. See that texture? That texture blew my fucking mind in 2006. It was the first high-res texture I'd encountered in a game. I just stared at it on my 19-inch tube TV in complete awe. So what if 360 was designed for an HD TV and I only had a CRT so I couldn't even read the tutorial menus in Dead Rising? I was in the next gen, damn it. And Dead Rising held my hand and walked me into that generation with complete confidence. The semi-serious but hilariously heavy-handed dialogue, the ridiculous Capcom tits, the silly costumes, the fact that Frank West walks like an extremely energetic cripple for some reason. Heavenly Sword, as I mentioned, was my first PS3 title, but Dead Rising was my first Generation 7 title, and on my first Generation 7 console, the Xbox 360. Dead Rising was the whole reason I bought the damn thing, and it assured me that in spite of the shiny new graphics, everything was going to be the same. Silly. Just the way I like it.
Good.
Additionally, the whole zombie phenomenon hadn't been beaten like a dead horse, resurrected, beaten like an undead horse, then shot in the head like it has been at this point. So the zombie game was still a cool concept, and playing Dead Rising was essentially like playing Dawn of the Dead the game, but in a way that it never could have been made if it was licensed as such a thing.
Perfect.
And while the silly is certainly strong with this game, there are some moments that are genuinely creepy, including the opening title screen, which paints an entirely different picture of the game than the one you'll be painting 15 minutes later when you're careening around the food court in a skateboard wearing a bikini and eating entire pizzas like they're chicken nuggets. Dead Rising 1 was a phenomenal title with near endless replay value that'd be damn near perfect if you could get Otis to shut the fuck up on occasion. Or get these mentally disabled people to stop actively trying to kill themselves? Wait, what? They're not supposed to be special needs? Then why the fuck are they doing this? Fuck it, I'm just staying to eat and see if I care. Oh, and 53,594. I'm an environment junkie. I'll forgive almost any of the sins of a video game or a movie if the environments enrapture me. Sorry. I really tried to avoid that pun. Don't worry, I hate myself. BioShock's environments were so well developed, so detailed, so fucking juicy, scrumptious, finger-looking good, that I would have forgiven any number of gameplay or storyline sins if BioShock contained anything that begged forgiving. And those culinary similes aren't an accident. BioShock's environments are so well put together that I want to fucking chew on them. They drip detail like they're covered in blowtorched lardo. And much like that most heart attack inducing of Italian pork treats, take one bite of BioShock and you're lost. Just gone in another world. Immediately and inexorably. Environment in this context, it means a lot of things. In the most basic sense, we're speaking of the visuals. The wide shots of the underwater metropolis of Rapture, the soupçon of decorative detritus in the corner of a room that never gets a second glance, the subtle flavors of color and texture that permeate every inch of game space. Go further, and it's the ambient sound adding shape to your surroundings that can be terrifying or eerie or beautifully maudlin. The laughter heard in an audio recording of a party that has long since ended, or the sorrowful cry of a mother whose life was destroyed by addiction.
No one will be there to sing this song. Hush now.
And that addiction fueling the desperation of the junkie splicers that roam what's left of Andrew Ryan's demolished dream. Minigames have good visuals, well-designed levels, tight controls, interesting plots. This is the nomenclature of the artistic medium we all love so much. And these descriptions do apply to BioShock, but in its case, they cease to mean anything. The walls of the compartments we like to force each aspect of a video game into are broken down, and we have no choice but to look at the work as a whole. And when that happens, and it damn sure does when you play BioShock, it becomes apparent that video games, at their best, aren't games at all. They're experiences. And BioShock, more than almost any other game ever released, proved that point. was initially going to put both Uncharted and The Last of Us on this list, and I scrapped that idea, because in spite of my desire to put hundreds of games on this list, exceptions had to be made, and Last of Us is the better game. Then a thought occurred to me that would allow me to honor both while being preferential to The Last of Us. Narrative game structure, telling a story like a movie that you actively participate in, reached the heights it has today as a result of the Uncharted series, but those heights are The Last of Us. A game that not only defines what it is to be a narrative tale without undertaking an ounce of pretension, but does so with a clarity of vision that's hard to find in storytelling, period. And while Uncharted was certainly an action movie to The Last of Us' drama, both The Last of Us and Uncharted at their core employ a similar structure. So this entry isn't a tie, it's for The Last of Us, but The Last of Us could never have been were it not for Uncharted. Much like Batman Arkham, The Last of Us funnels its individual elements into a singular experience. The gathering and use of items, the inventory system, combat, sound design, performance capture, they're all high-end and cleanly executed, and they serve to inform the game space that Naughty Dog wants you to occupy. And then comes perhaps the greatest accomplishment of The Last of Us, and don't jump ship when I mention this because I swear it's important. Its use of violence. It's pervasive, yes, but it isn't gratuitous. And that's an important distinction. The world of The Last of Us only allows survival at the edge of bloody knuckles and calloused feet, and it doesn't want you to forget that. Its violence is a storytelling mechanism, a requirement, another of myriad elements that pull you into its terrifying, threatening, verdant, detailed, and varied world. And that's as far as we're going. If you've played The Last of Us, you'll have noticed that I only have footage from about the first 20 minutes of the game, minus some spoilers, and a couple of cuts from the launch trailer. There's a really good reason for that. I'm not here to review The Last of Us in any traditional sense, or to convince anyone to play it if they haven't. If I was to do such a thing, it would detract, I feel, from the eventual experience they would have, and if you've played it, I have nothing to tell you. But I just need to say that The Last of Us is a technical marvel, that to inhabit its world is to be told a story in a way that it simply cannot be told in any other medium, and by that standard, could never have been told at any other point in human history. And that when I reached that conclusion while playing The Last of Us, it was one of the most exciting realizations I've ever had. It's gonna be hard for me to get my dander up in order to convince you of the greatness of the Assassin's Creed franchise, because I've played it so much, so consistently, for so many years that it's as much a part of my life as brushing my teeth or changing my socks. With the exception of a couple of missteps since AC1, pay for upgrade microtransactions in multiplayer, excessive and overpriced DLC for single player. Connor. Ubisoft has released one very playable game a year since AC2 in 2009. And while not a perfect model, it certainly comes closer than any other franchise to successfully serializing the video game. And that's probably the least of its accomplishments. Assassin's Creed is a massive franchise, so speaking of it as one entity is a bit difficult, especially given the time I've allotted myself with this countdown format. But I shall do my level best, because Assassin's Creed deserves no less than that. Like Super Mario 64 and Resident Evil before it, AC1 helped usher in a new generation by creating an experience that simply wouldn't have been possible on the hardware of old. While its mission structure was a bit repetitious, that problem would soon be solved in AC2, which not only expanded available mission types and environment size, but went beyond the technical and created one of the most recognizable figures in gaming from the past decade, Ezio Auditore da Firenze. Forgive my shitty Italian accent, I tried, at least. While part 2 of Ezio's trilogy, Brotherhood, was arguably the better game, it simply expanded on the formula, offering technical improvements to go along with Ubisoft's now public plan. Serialized Assassin's Creed. One release a year. Revelations was next, and brought little else to the table, but if you were a fan, it did its job and gave Ezio's story the ending it deserved. 3, well, Assassin's Creed 3 was a technical achievement, to be sure. Tree climbing, hunting, better character animations, slight combat upgrades. But after experiencing the life of Renaissance Italy's most suave assassin, AC3 Connor felt a bit wooden. A little harder to root for. A problem quickly rectified with the release of the AC that splits generations, AC4, which adds so much new and wonderful to the franchise in addition to the second best AC protagonist, that there's no way I can cover it all. It's just the best since Brotherhood. Hands down. So meanwhile, Assassin's Creed Online was becoming the most pervasive multiplayer experience of my life since the great UT2K4 addiction of 05. AC multiplayer isn't everyone's favorite, and it's flawed, certainly, but damned if it isn't original, and damned if I don't absolutely love it. Stalk. Hide. And at just the right moment, BAM! Poison needle to your target's neck. Or you can just run around like an asshat and then drop smoke should someone have the audacity to attempt a running kill. Oh, by the way, this footage is from Black Flag on PS4, but Assassin's Creed multiplayer has been as consistently entertaining as everything else in the series since it was introduced in Brotherhood, so I consider this a fair representation of the experience, regardless of iteration or platform. Assassin's Creed multiplayer has and will continue to own my brain unless this microtransaction bullshit gets any more out of hand. The day I have to spend real money to unlock Poison and Smoke Bomb is the day I quit playing. Angrily, I might add. I don't even care about hurling my PS4 controller across the room, the damn thing's already falling apart anyway. From the rooftops of Venice to the crowded streets of Constantinople to the sticky hot villages of the Caribbean, Assassin's Creed historical fiction has woven quite the intricate tapestry. One so intricate that I'm still exploring its detail, and with a bit of luck, future installments of AC will live up to their well-earned legacy without getting bogged down in tradition. Mirror's Edge holds a lot of subjective appeal to me, and as mentioned at the start of my first video, this is a subjective list. But Mirror's Edge should be recognized for a number of reasons that fall beyond my personal feelings about it, and we shall get to those in time. This entry could get a little long, so go empty your bladder, get a, beer, soda, whatever. Just get comfortable. Futurism as it applies to sci-fi is the entire reason I'm here, making this video. It's why I loved Blade Runner and Akira when I was a kid, which led me to seek out other media that contained dystopian or otherwise futuristic cityscapes, which led me to Final Fantasy VII, which led me to game with a fervor that hadn't existed previously, which led me here. But dystopian futurism isn't all polluted cityscapes and bright neon lights. In the case of Mirror's Edge, the skyline consists solely of the towering glass edifices that we in the real world use as pristine examples of human triumph. In the world of Mirror's Edge, they're even larger, more awe-inspiring, and set against a horizon not obscured by pollution. There's not even garbage, human or otherwise, in the nooks and crannies of the city in Mirror's Edge. Aesthetically, then, Mirror's Edge represents an idealized urban future. But only aesthetically. Beneath the surface, a surveillance state eerily reminiscent of the world we now live in. Cameras covering every corner of major cities, all communications monitored and recorded. I'm gonna stop short of political on a game channel that prides itself on the frequency and efficacy of its dick jokes. I'll also mention that the politics of Mirror's Edge are a little heavy-handed to say the least, but not before I say this. The environments of Mirror's Edge plug directly into the part of my brain that yearns to live in a world that doesn't yet exist. And the dirt just below the surface of its gorgeous skyline contributes character where visuals alone simply can't. The first-person parkour that is the primary gameplay element of Mirror's Edge is at times frustrating, but more often exhilarating. That it discourages combat at nearly every opportunity is a clever way to keep the player focused on the game's better-constructed gameplay elements, and its crispy, electronic soundtrack is the perfect complement to a world of sharp angles, refined military tactics, and perfectly pressed uniforms. My adoration for Mirror's Edge doesn't exist apart from the understanding that it was, in many instances, technically flawed. And that adoration isn't the only reason for its being number one on this list. Risk is about the last word that springs to mind when speaking of console cycle 7. Safety, especially as it applies to AAA games, was a pervasive force. Even when it didn't lead to out-and-out bad games, things just got a little boring on occasion. Each year saw the release of a sequel to a sequel's sequel. Even my number 2 game on this list, Assassin's Creed, was guilty of this sin. We're assured that this sequel delivery system was providing new features and polished gameplay mechanics every year, but even when these words weren't a bit of an overstatement, true innovation was left to indie developers. They took the risks. They took palpable risks, rent or food taking the place of a AAA company's slightly out of balance sheet. Yet somehow, in this environment, Mirror's Edge was released by EA. Yeah. And it served to demonstrate what can happen when a good team with a proper budget is allowed to take a few risks. In a world filled with fear, utterly terrified of risk in any capacity, run by massive companies that would have us eating highly profitable Grey Goop number 15 if only they could convince us to stuff it into our ignorant maws, which we totally will once it's bacon flavored, AAA game companies are eschewing the beautifully flawed for a guaranteed paycheck. Which is a shame, because art cannot exist without risk. We should feel privileged as denizens of the first world that our only artistic risk is financial. There was some internet backlash from the oversensitive, but nobody had their hands chopped off for making Hotline Miami. How appropriate then that one of a small number of AAA games to take any risks at all in the past 8 years presents a world with problems which stem entirely from a dearth of risk. Being too clean, too controlled. Even more appropriate that it was an amazing game, that it showed the flaws of the system from which it was birthed. Even if it was too little too late. Even if nothing will change. And that extraordinarily upbeat note marks the end of this countdown. Thank you for watching. I'll be back Tuesday and Friday every week from now until the end of time, or until people actually find my YouTube channel and start making fun of me, and I can't take it anymore. Whichever comes first. See you later!